Hey everyone, it's Nihara here. Guys, today we're talking about bases, we're talking about efficiency, we're talking about kind of what I think is a really big problem, which is lower tier items when you're building your base. Many of them are better than higher tier options, which is the exact opposite direction that we want to be going. You know, a lot of people said Cobalt Pace was the problem and complained about it. I agree that Cobalt Pace was an issue, but I don't think it was the core of the problem. I actually and I've stared at this spreadsheet that I've made, going through all of the efficiencies and going through all of what it takes and the volume to build everything. And I really don't think Cobalt was a big part of the problem. It was a part of the problem. It was not the entirety of the problem. So let's just dive into it. Let me actually show you what I mean. Also, guys, just like on my last video, I did get some comments that were like, you're wrong, whatever. I'm showing you the math, guys. I am perfectly fine with being wrong. But I am showing you the math. I'm showing you the evidence. If I did my math wrong, if I got something wrong, entered some data, whatever, let me know. And if you have something to add that's helpful, absolutely, I'm totally open to that. But if you're just like, you're wrong because I don't like you, or this is stupid because I don't like you, like, I'm probably just going to delete your comment and move on with my life, okay? I'm happy to engage otherwise. All right, so let's start off and let's talk about water cisterns, which I think is a good place to illustrate exactly my point here. So let's say you're going out to the deep desert. You need to store a bunch of water. What do you bring? Well, you bring a bunch of large water cisterns, right? I mean, that they're the largest, they're the highest tier, they take the longest to unlock. That's got to be the best thing to unlock, right? Or to use. Well, maybe not. So if we look at a large water cistern here, it holds 100,000 milliliters, or 100 liters, if you will. I'll probably use liters because it's easier. Well, how many medium water cisterns would it take to equal that same 100,000 water? Well, it would only take 4. How many just regular water cisterns would it take? It would take 20. That's a lot. That's a crazy amount. You're going to have problems finding space for that, maybe, and it's going to be an issue. But here's the question. Whenever you're going out to the deep desert, the main thing that you're concerned about is volume. And again, I realize that that's a lot less of an issue here. But, if you can get things in one load, it's a lot better than getting them in 2 load if you're a solo player. And if you're in a guild, things scale, in a guild, you have more people, so it's not as bad, but it's still a problem. Okay, so we can see that, 24 and 1. Well, what is the total weight? Well, if we look at the actual total volume, first off, those water cisterns, they only take 100 volume. They're a third cheaper than the large water cisterns as far as volume is concerned, which is really the issue with the deep desert. So why is the large water cistern, why is it, cost 50% more as far as volume than the smaller one? That's a problem, right? That doesn't make any sense. I mean, if I'm getting higher tier things, I want them to be better and not worse. Now, again, yeah, it's a problem to find room maybe for 20 water cisterns. However, the other part of this is that regular water cisterns just require scrap, which you can just mine up kind of infinite amount really easily in the deep desert, probably right beside your base. And if you can, they're also pretty small, so you can kind of stash them everywhere. So it's actually not that hard to make 20 water cisterns and throw them around your base. Really, the only reason not to is because it's annoying. And I don't think that something just not being annoying is the best reason to use the top tier thing. I really think it should be the most efficient, and I really think it should be the best. And, I have an efficiency number here, and all this is, it's taking, in this case, the total water held and divided it by the volume, higher being better. And we can see that it's just a way of illustrating like how much better the smaller items are. And you know what? Because those small water cisterns are such a pain, my guild, my group, we actually use medium water cisterns. Sure, we have to have like a whole bunch of them, but we can always kind of find a place to stash them with half levels and everything else, and it's not that big of a deal, and it's just more efficient. The other thing is they're made with lower tier, it's lower tier, ingredients that go into making it, so it's not that big of a deal if something happens or if we just want to leave stuff out there. It's not as big of a deal. And so many, many reasons why this doesn't make any sense, and I wish it were better. Okay, that's one example. Is this a common problem? It is, actually. So let's look at storage. And this is interesting because this is not following the same pattern. There is a crazy outlier here. So what does it take? How many storage containers to equal 3,500? Okay, which is the size of the medium storage, which is the largest one we have access to right now. Well, one of those is going to be total volume of 72. And it's V. I assume it's volume. I don't really know what this mystical V is, to be totally honest with you, because it's a little bit ambiguous to me. Now, if we go one step down, the aluminum tier, we end up with two of those equaling the same amount, okay? And that's a little bit lighter to have those two items versus the one at 64. Now, with the storage containers, there are how many spaces it has available, but generally speaking, that's not the issue. It's often volume. It can be, especially when it gets to the smaller sizes, okay? Again, looking at the, I believe it's iron tier, we have 5 that would equal the same amount, and actually it's more than that amount. It's actually 3750, and total volume of 40, so it's even lighter. And again, we're almost half as much as the top tier item. That doesn't make any sense. And then if we look at the small storage containers, they're actually not as good. And what the other issue with the small storage containers is, like, they don't hold very much, and it's super annoying to have 50 of these. But again, we're back to the issue where it's the annoyance factor is what is leading you to choose one thing over the other. And I don't think that is a good reward for reaching the top tier and for having the top tier items. Just one man's opinion, but I think it's a fairly strong one, okay? I think a lot of people will share. Now let's look at the efficiency on this, because if you look at the efficiency, it's kind of crazy. So we see small storage container 36, but if you look at the chest, the iron chest, it's 94, okay? It's crazy more efficient than we are the quote-unquote medium storage container, all right? So this is a situation where I realize, well, hey, if we just bring out, for most things, a bunch of medium storage containers, and we use iron, we don't even have to bring the iron back if we don't want to, because it's so easy and so cheap to bring out. And the only situation that you really want the medium storage containers is really if you're bringing back a whole bunch of spice and you need a place to put it. And then, yeah, I get it. You probably want to go with either a aluminum tier, the storage container, or the medium storage container, just for utility and it not being super annoying to use a whole bunch of them. But other than that, like, there's no reason to actually use them, okay? And I just think that is unfortunate. Now, is this the hugest volume in the world? No. But if you look at all these things, since most things are like this, what you can find out is that, well, if you add all this up, it might be the point where there's a break point where it takes an extra load. And so if you're a solo player, or even if you're in a group or a guild and you're only having, maybe one person is going out to build your base early in the morning or something, or on Tuesdays, if they have to go for a second load because it pushes you over that break point, that's super annoying, right? Ideally, you'd be able to get things in as few of loads as possible. So that's why I think this stuff is so important. Okay, let's go ahead and move on. There's still some other things here. Power generators. This is another one that's kind of wild. Okay, same deal here that we had with the water cisterns. Fuel power generators, the cheapest ones that you make with scrap metal, guys. The thing is, they're free because you can find fuel cells and you can find scrap out in the deep desert, and the only issue is room. And we've all seen it. You got a whole floor of these cheap power generators, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if I am going to take the effort, if I have the resources to take out a spice power generator, or even like the directional wind turbine or directional wind turbines or something like that, if I'm going to do that, I expect it to be better, right? Doesn't that make sense? So if we look here at the efficiency, this is one of the few places where it actually makes sense, okay? Spice Power Generator actually is better than the lower tier things when you account for the fuel that you have to take out there. So it actually is better to not use the directional or omnidirectional wind turbines. It is better to use the Spice Power Generator if you're getting some close multiple of 1,000, because that's how much power it generates, to be able to bring out there. So this is a situation where it's a little bit nuanced, but for the most part, what my group does is we bring out one spice generator, but it weighs so much. I mean, we're talking about 682 volume here when you talk about the fuel for it and everything for the week. That's crazy. If you just use the cheap the free ones where you can, the lowest tier fuel power generators, if you have the space, it doesn't cost you anything. And if you have to bring out multiple of these, that's almost a load by itself. Bringing out 3 of these, right, is basically a thopter load. Even with the new changes where you can hold 2,000 volume, bringing out 3 of these is a load by itself. Okay, all that's well and good. Why is this? What is going on? Well, I can actually explain it to you after looking at this a lot. So the core issue here is if you look at something like plastanium, plastanium takes a ton of really heavy resources. It takes titanium ore, which is zero point 0.9 volume per. It takes 4 of those. And then stravidium, that is also very heavy, and the stravidium fiber is like 0.6, but it takes 3 of them to make one of those fibers, and I think they're also 0.9. But plastanium weighs 1 volume per. And then if you look, you go a tier down, duraluminum is 0.9 per. And then aluminum is 0.7 per. And then steel is only 0.5. And then iron is 0.4. Okay, so there's a couple of jumps there. But basically what you find is that iron, or steel actually, we'll talk about steel. Steel is half the weight of plastanium. So you need an item to require twice the amount of steel as it does to plastanium for it to equal the same volume whenever you're talking about just the ore or the refined materials that you need. What that means is, and what that equals is, like, the higher tier things get heavier. That's the simple part of it, right? That doesn't make any sense. Why is the higher tier thing heavier? You would think it would be lighter. And because of that, even though, the amounts scale relatively okay, because the higher tier items are heavier, it just doesn't make sense. If steel is half the weight and you can make something that is, almost as good, or that only requires a couple of these things, it makes more sense to just make more of the lower tier items. And then when you're talking about stuff that you can make with just scrap or even copper, which you can just find plentifully out in the desert and refine very easy yourself there, then it's a case of, well, it's basically free. So now you're comparing free to the highest tier resource. And again, as we saw on the spreadsheet, I really think that the main issue for me is that, power generation is crazy, right? It just makes sense to have a whole floor of power generators. Well, that's annoying. So now if I want to do the most efficient thing, I'm having to do all this tedious task. Okay, so maybe I want to go with a spice generator anyways, but now I've got to do an extra load just to bring out all the power I need from spice generation. Neither one of these are great options, and it's just something that I think somebody messed up in a spreadsheet, someone wasn't thinking about. I do think the core issue is largely, you could change the values of how much it took to make everything, but I do think that not even the weight of the unrefined ore, but the weight of the refined material should be lower and should get lower as you go up. Now, I don't think that the low tier items should necessarily go up in weight. I don't know how that would look. That could be very annoying and troublesome for lower tier players, or players that are at lower tiers that are leveling up. But I do think it's absolutely a problem at the end game, and something that I kind of want to point out, and hopefully, Funcom, we can bring this to their attention. So, guys, if you're with me on this, if you followed the math, if you think this is broken, and you've also noticed this, do me a favor, upvote the video, give me a like, share the video with other people, and let's just get the word out there, okay? Because I would really like this to be fixed. I will tell you guys that those of you who are going out every week and you're having to figure out what your base calculations need, I am working on a calculator, something that you can have and save your own version of in a Google Doc. And their sheets, and I will have that out probably next week, if not sooner, and we'll have a video on that explaining how all that works. So if you're interested in that, also, keep an eye out, stay tuned, and we'll have that soon. Anyways, guys, I appreciate you watching. If you like nerdy stuff like this, if you like spreadsheets in your video games, that's a lot of what I do, because I'm just that kind of nerd. So don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks, everybody, for watching.